you see now Major League Baseball players, they have the song they want to come up to. The NASCAR guys, when they come out on the thing, they'll play music, and they're picking their favorite songs that they want to come out to or whatever. I mean, I've been married 41 years, nicest person I've ever met, and never thought twice about it. And it's one of those things where, I have a happy life, but I think I have a happy life because I've got a wonderful wife. I got wonderful kids. I make a living doing what I enjoy. I work with and for people that I love, doing something that I love. Now, eventually, when we started doing the programming, that became a little bit of a different ballgame.
Welcome to another episode of In the Chair. Today we are in the chair with Pat O'Connor. This is not a musician or up-and-coming artist like I usually talk with. Pat is an author. He's kind of an expert, has built a career around music sync and licensing, and so I think that's going to be fascinating for this audience. He has a company called POC Media and based out of Philadelphia, PA. Pat, welcome to In the Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Great to see you. Thanks, Wiley.
I think it's cool. So you're sitting right now in Village Studios.
Yeah.
Where you mentioned Fleetwood Mac recorded Rumors, Asia,
Yeah.
Captain Rose, everybody. What takes you to Village Studios?
We're having a great time here. I'm managing. I manage a fellow named Nick James, and he's a very talented Americana rock type of an artist. And we wanted to. We were looking for the best way to capture that sound, and we got a chance to meet John Alasia, who's a producer, and he's produced Dave Matthews, and he did some early stuff with John Mayer and a number of artists. And so when we met him and played some of the music for him, and had the opportunity to come in and work with him on this, so it's exciting. Nick's 24 years old, just turning 25 shortly, and he plays guitar, he sings, he writes his own stuff, and he's got a killer band, and just a nice kid who works hard and is entertaining. So he's fun.
Do you think it is more cool to him or to you that you're in that particular studio?
I think I'm probably more excited about the studio than he is. I think the growing up, growing up listening to Rumors and Asia and August and everything after, and these just iconic albums. But I mean, there's a couple hundred albums that have been recorded here, and including recently, I think Miley Cyrus, and I think somebody told me that they had Magic Johnson in here yesterday doing some commercials and stuff. It's the place is incredible. I mean, they've got a bunch of Neve consoles, and it's just. It's for somebody like me who's sort of I'm a studio geek. I like the gadgets, and I like the just the vibe, and so it's a blast for me. Nick's having a great time. I mean, he's making a great record, but whatever studio Nick went in, he would be having a good time and making a great record. But for me, this was pretty special to have this opportunity, and the people that we work with are, I always say, if you're lucky enough to do what you enjoy with and for people that you enjoy, you're pretty blessed, and so we've been pretty fortunate that way.
That's cool. I've been lucky enough to be in a studio with one Neve board, and when you just said, "Oh, there's a bunch of Neve boards," like,
they got there's like 10 studios in here. It's ridiculous. It's it's like 3 or 4 stories tall, and you go around, and everybody's wonderful. I mean, the engineers are wonderful. The musicians are wonderful. Nick's wonderful. The whole thing's fantastic. We're having a blast.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I will definitely keep an eye out for the album, because now I'm literally looking into the studio where it was recorded.
Yeah. This is the place.
I want to get into really licensing and sync. You started POC Media with the sole intent of developing something in that industry. Is that right? Or
Kind of, yeah. I used to work. I had a background as a musician. I was a keyboard player, and then I went to college, and I ended up getting a degree in biophysics, which is, comes in really handy with what I do now. So, but I worked in marketing at Honeywell for a while, and then little bit later, I decided to start a business. I thought it would be kind of fun if I could do something that tied to the music business. And I didn't know exactly what that would be. I figured it would be some form of creativity and some form of, marketing. And so I got lucky. I wrote a song that ended up winning the Best New BMI Songwriter Award. It was a song that never made an album, but I wrote it with Amy Grant in mind, and it got into a lot of the right circles. And then eventually from there, I got a chance to, to work with some other artists. I, got a chance to write with the guys from Three Doors Down, and got a chance to do session work with a lot of guys that were, in many ways, they were my heroes. These were people who, 10 years earlier, I was going to their concerts going, yeah, I love these guys. And all of a sudden I'm in a room working with some of these people. So once that started happening, I thought, well, that would be, if I can figure out a way to leverage what I had been doing in marketing to also, help further their careers. And I ended up managing a couple of artists, and we had a little bit of success with that. And then the licensing thing happened pretty much by accident. I was at a Philadelphia Flyers game, and they had just put the new jumbotrons in, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you took not just highlights cut to music, but if you could cut highlights to music videos. And I had never edited a video before, but I figured, it's similar to music, and my thought process at the time, I knew a couple guys who could edit, and I figured, I'd make the pitch to the Flyers. So I was at a Flyers game. We got a chance to pitch the owner directly on the idea. And so, and I just said, hey, we'll do it for free. If you send me highlights. And I was able to get a couple of music videos from people that by now I had gotten to know in the music business. And, we edited them. They liked it. And the next year, the Flyers owner, Mr. Ed Snyder, he called Commissioner Gary Bettman of the NHL. And we ended up getting a deal doing all of the NHL arenas for a few years. And but I had to figure out how to get paid for it. So the whole trick there was, if I tried to sell sponsorship, I would have been selling against the teams or the NHL. Like it's like it seems kind of obvious at first that, like, oh, well, you get, a sponsor to back you. But the thing is, like, the hockey teams are selling their own sponsorship deals, and the NHL is selling their league-wide deals. So the likelihood that you can thread the needle and get your sponsor and get everything to work, it's a long shot. But what I figured at the time is maybe I could get record companies to pay me to get exposure. You catch people in a heightened emotional state, and they associate that music with their favorite sport and their favorite team. And I was able to, everybody turned me down twice. And so I went to all the labels. They all said no. But I had a chance encounter with a fellow who was the president of a record label. And I went to him and I said, if you tell everybody that you're paying us to do this, I'll work for you guys for free. But just tell everybody else you're paying us to do it. And within a year, I had 24 labels working with me. This is back before the consolidation of the music industry. Wow. And so it launched the business. And then, like any business, you have it's very rarely a situation where the lights are all green. So I get this thing started, and we're flying. We come out of the shoot. It's I'm saying it was me, and then I hired a couple of people, and was working out of the back of the house, and eventually we get it to a point where we had a couple guys that I was farming some of the editing out to. And then all of a sudden there's this proliferation of cable channels, because this was back like in 1990. So there's a proliferation of cable channels in the mid to late 90s, and they're building all these new buildings because the teams realized they could make more money off of the luxury suites, and they could sell more sponsorship and sell deals on the luxury side. So the cable networks moved into the buildings, which meant they no longer needed me to edit their videos. So after I had invested a lot of money in all this equipment and, had hired a couple of people, I was suddenly finding myself without any clients. And so I figured we could take some of what we were doing, and I hired a couple of young coding guys. And I said, let's put together something that we can license to a network. And so within a year, we licensed it to Fox Sports. And we started becoming music supervisors and music clearance partners with what they were doing. And then, since then, I mean, we ended up working with everybody. We started produced some commercials for Major League Baseball, some commercials for NASCAR, some for the NHL. Started doing some work with the NFL Network and NFL Films, and Amazon Prime ended up becoming a client of ours. And now we do like the Thursday Night Football and NBA on Prime and NASCAR productions. And so it's one of those things where if you look at it, if you look at POC Media, it looks like a very well thought out company. It's not. It's one of these things where it was just a constant process of stumbling in the right direction and just trying to find a way to create value. And I think that's the trick to any business. If you can create more value than you're asking for in return, you've got a win-win. Mm-hmm. And that was the way things played out for us. So
wow. So I mean, when you started this, organizations like BMI and ASCAP are out there. Yeah. Like they're doing all the royalties for airplay and things like that. In those earliest days where you put music to video and charge for it, are you working with the music licensing companies to?
Well, the thing we had going for us at the time was a lot of the teams, like all of the buildings had PRO licenses. Oh. So you could play the music. And so in some cases you could play the music or you could play the music video that the labels would give you. And I started going to we learned licensing as we went, because when we first started, there weren't really many rules. Like I don't think anybody, if there were rules, nobody knew what they were. And so, but you would deal with the publishers and you would deal with the record companies. They call it, master rights are owned by the record company and sync rights are owned by the publisher. So I would go to them and I would say, tell me what we need to do. Like, I didn't go at it with the approach of, we're just going to go do it. I went to them with the idea of, if you're the publishing company, help me understand what I need to do to keep it legal. And what we had going for us was, I made this pitch originally to the record companies. I was going directly to the presidents at the record companies, because it was a completely new concept. Nobody could put a number on what the value really was. I mean, I had a number that I was charging them, but nobody really could tell, is it worth it? And what I was charging them was not a significant enough amount of money. It was probably a rounding error to most of these record labels at the time, because they were just trying to go for exposure. So if you have the record company president telling you to do it, then somebody in licensing at the record company is not going to really get in the way of it. They're going to come back and say, hey, we should be considering this, this, and this. And they would usually first have that conversation with the label head. And then they would come back to us and say, hey, why don't we structure it this way or that way? And but the teams all had their blankets, so they were already paying. They were paying for the right to be able to do whatever they wanted to in the arenas. Now, eventually, when we started doing the programming, that became a little bit of a different ballgame, because initially there were 3 broadcast outlets. There was NBC, well, I guess 4. There was NBC, CBS, ABC, and then Fox. And there was one fledgling cable company called ESPN at the time. And that was it. I mean, there were no other players in the game. And eventually, you had all these Fox regional networks, and you had the Comcast regional networks, and you had FS1, and you had. I mean, now you've got streaming. I mean, now you've got companies like Peacock and like Amazon and Netflix, and companies that are streaming all this stuff. So it became as we were doing it, what we found is we got more guidance. We knew we were going to get guidance whether we wanted it or not. So the thought process was, somebody's going to tell us what we can or can't do. So it's better to find out on the front end. And so, we would go to them and say, here's what we're trying to do, and does this work? And we'd make sure we had all the right sign-offs. The other thing that was happening was a lot of the people that I got to know back then, like I lecture at some colleges sometimes, and the kids will always say, how do you get to know the record label presidents? How do you get to know the heads of the publishing companies? How do you get to know these heavyweight managers? Well, you get to know them 20 years before they become the presidents at the record labels and the publishing companies. And so I was, when I was starting the business, I was young. Most of these people we were dealing with were pretty young. And there were label heads that they were reporting to. And those, I made the pitch to the label heads, but these younger folks that were getting involved with what we were doing, many of them went on to become presidents at these companies. And as we all sort of figured out what we were doing and how we could, contribute to everybody's career and everybody's goals, it just became much easier. And then, I always, relationships determine results. That's one of my, my book. I've got 7 rules that I put in the book. I always say, mom, dad, and God love you no matter what. Fear, doubt, and indecision kill, but they die in the presence of faith. So you have to have faith that you're going to succeed no matter what. Relationships, the power of your relationships is going to determine the effectiveness of your results. You need to know what you want most. You need to never put the things that you want now ahead of what you want most. And then you need to never give up. And if you do those things, my experience has been people who succeed, whether they're aware of it or not, they're doing those things.
Yeah.
And people who fail, whether they're aware of it or not, they're breaking one of those rules. They're either operating out of fear, or they're being indecisive, or they're forgetting how important relationships are, or they're putting, I always refer to it as putting their head ahead of their heart. Your heart knows what you want most, your head knows what you want now. If you follow your head, you get yourself in trouble. That's people who develop addictions, or people who are not faithful to other folks, or people who try to get every last nickel out of a deal instead of focusing on what's going to matter over the next 10 years. And so
Yeah, that's I think that's interesting because you're talking about it both from a business venture side, but it's the music business. And I think for artists, I mean, go hang out at the club,
right,
early,
yeah,
watch the other bands, watch the bands after you, whether it's a golf course or the
yeah.
club or just whatever, relationships matter,
Oh yeah, it's everything. I mean, if
Oh,
you think about it, I mean, the 3 most important things you're gonna 3 most important decisions you're gonna make in your life is, who you choose to believe in as your creator, and who you're going to spend the rest of your life with, who you marry. I mean, I've been married 41 years, nicest person I've ever met, and never thought twice about it. And it's one of those things where, I have a happy life, but I think I have a happy life because I've got a wonderful wife. I got wonderful kids. I make a living doing what I enjoy. I work with and for people that I love, doing something that I love. And if you're fortunate enough to do that, then you got your spiritual side is together, you got your personal relationship side, and then the third thing is what you decide, how you decide to spend most of your time. And either for better or worse, most of us spend most of our time working on the things that allow us to afford the lifestyle that we have. And
sure.
so, and I mean, for some people, they call it a job, and if you think about it, it's, if the job that you have, if you're just doing it for money, it's going to get old really fast, and it's not going to be fulfilling, and it's going to affect your marriage. It's going to affect your relationship with your creator. It's going to affect everything. Whereas if you put yourself in a position where you prioritize, the most important thing is your relationship with your creator and your relationship with your wife and kids and the people that are closest to you. And then what you're doing, and are you creating value for people, and do you love them? Do you do what you love with and for people that you love? If you have all 3 of those things going for you, then barring any major health issues, you're going to have a wonderful life. And that's been my experience. I've been blessed with pretty good health, so I've been able to kind of ride the wave for a while. So
Um, yeah, it's such good advice. Yeah, I'm thinking about there was a parable or a story just about a guy who was really poor, but every morning he'd get up in his boat and go catch a bunch of fish and take it back and give it to his family, and they would eat.
yeah,
And he just lived like, in a mud hut or whatever. Uh,
right.
and someone like you or me ran into him. It's like, you're catching all these fish. Why don't you make a market and then you can sell and build? And so as the story goes along, you could build this whole thing so that you could send fish everywhere, make a lot of money. And the guy was like, well, why would you do that? It's like, well, then when you retire, you can just fish all day. It's like, wait,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
already got that. So no,
Yeah.
you do what you love and you're not working a day in your life, sort of thing.
You get to spend more time at the beach. So,
I have a follow-up question. So I was a teenager in the 80s, thinking about sports arenas, particularly with music. I mean, one of the most iconic things is when the Chicago Bulls started entering to
oh
Alan
yeah.
Parsons' Sirius.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you worked with that instance. Is that something, I guess, licensing and royalties and something, is that an instance where Alan Parsons would benefit greatly from that particular placement? Or is that just house music is covered by the blanket license? Uh,
I don't know specifically what their deal was. I know that we've done deals with arenas and stadiums that benefit everybody. Um,
Mhm.
it's if you're and some teams are just going to play music when the team comes on the ice or on the field or whatever, and you see now Major League Baseball players, they have the song they want to come up to. The NASCAR guys, when they come out on the thing, they'll play music, and they'll it's usually it's they're picking their favorite songs that they want to come out to or whatever.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, that stuff's covered by the blanket. It's covered by the PRO blanket. But when it gets posted on social media, somebody has to pay a sync fee for that. Or when it shows up in a broadcast and it gets re-aired as a broadcast, there's a rule called ephemeral, which there's no such thing as ephemeral anymore. In the old days, what ephemeral meant is you're watching Monday Night Football or whatever, and they're going to play a song, and it started off as songs that they're playing in the stadium. So they're going to play Queen, "We Will Rock You" or something, and you heard it on the air, but it wasn't really a licensed track. It was just something that was ambient there. Or they're going to a commercial and they're playing a bumper because you're doing a game in a certain city and they're playing a song from somebody from that city. But and what ephemeral meant was it was just used once, and it wasn't really synced. It was usually just somebody hit play and it was a needle drop as you went to the commercial. Nowadays, with video on demand and with all of the streaming and the cable channels and the apps, I mean, most of these sports network have their own apps that they end up running on. You can watch stuff on your mobile devices or uh, on anything. And you watch it on your computer, on your phone, your iPod or iPad or whatever. So I'm dating myself with iPod, right? Yeah, but your iPad or your Surface Go or whatever. And so now you have to license. You license music because if it's the only way you cannot license that music is if it's not going to be used. So in some cases, and I won't even name the clients, but in some cases we're doing stuff for clients where they'll put out a sanitized version of the sporting event. So in other words, we may be using music going to a commercial, um, but on the international feed, it's using stock music out of a library that they've already purchased the right to use that music. So if it's something like that, then it may still re-air. So we license it, but we're only licensing it for use in the United States. Even though something like that could show up on the internet and somebody could end up, seeing it in another country, or, somebody could, it's their favorite team and they reposted it and they put it on YouTube, or they put it on their Instagram or social media or whatever, and it shows up someplace. So there's, some of the rules get a little bit fuzzy, but the way it normally works is if you're a broadcast outlet or a cable or streaming company, those companies are buttoned up, and they're the ones that work with us. They say, hey, we're using this during a program. The program may re-air for a year, so we're going to license this song for an airing followed up by possible re-airs for a year, but we're not re-editing it. It's not a different cut. It's the same cut. And then at the end of a year they'll go ahead and take it down. So
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a particular show, it doesn't matter what it was, that I watched a lot during the pandemic. Uh,
yeah.
just watched it over and over and over, and the theme song to the show was just a little bit of a Devo song.
Right.
And at one point, I had a tonsillectomy. I was going to be, just laid up at home for about 3 days recovering. And my wife gets me the a DVD of the first few seasons of this show. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, great, I'm going to watch the show. And so I put it in, and the bumper into and out of the show is not that song. It's really canned, crappy music.
Yeah.
And it just hit me at that time. It's like, oh, the licensing was for the showings only on this network,
It
but
was for the original airing. Yeah.
yeah, not for worldwide DVD distribution. Uh,
And the technology exists to be able to do that stuff now. And they can, I mean, you can geofence things. There's all sorts of ways of dealing with that stuff now that just didn't, they were either non-issues in the past or they didn't exist in the past. So
there are so many things I want to talk to you about, but I'm thinking from any songwriters or artists who are watching this,
yeah.
um, when you would approach a highlight reel for a hockey team,
Yeah.
like I want to put music to this. What is the process of choosing a song? Do you think of a genre or a sound or beats per minute or something, or do you
Yeah,
just
it's a little bit of it is a vibey thing. Some of the other thing is it's the people who are composing the music or pitching the music. One of the things I found a long time ago with my business is that the less you worry about what people think, the easier life is. So what I would find is like I would pitch songs to people. There's one I won't name the artist, but there's one artist that uh, apparently was everybody was afraid to pitch him on using his song in a specific commercial because the licensing deal was lower than what he would normally accept.
okay?
And so his publisher, his label, his attorney didn't want to pitch it. And so I went and I said, well, why don't you give me backstage tickets to a show? I'll go pitch right now. I don't care if he gets mad at me. I don't know him. So anyway, I showed up, took my wife and kids, and my kids were my daughter was in elementary school. I think my son was in high school, and we went and met him. He was charming. He was wonderful with us. And then he sent my wife and kids out to their seats, and then he said to me, he's going, yeah, I feel like you're undervaluing my music. I really, your offer is low. And he goes, I know why nobody pitched it to me because your offer is significantly lower than what I would accept. Now, it was a good deal. It was a six-figure deal. I mean, it was not, it shouldn't have been insulting to anyone, but it was not what he would have wanted. And so as we were talking about it, and I mean, kept it friendly, and I just said, hey, look, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. And there were two things that came out of that. Number one, I said to him, you met my wife, and he was adorable with my wife. And so I said, you met my wife. Our second date was seeing you and your band. And I named a specific venue, a specific year that we went to see this guy. And he said, what was the sign on the stage? And I told him what the sign said on the stage. And he had a funny sign on the stage. And he just looked at me and he's going, so you really were there. You were one of the early fans. I said, oh yeah. I wanted to use your song because you're a part of the fabric of my life. You're part of the soundtrack of my relationship with my wife, everything. And so he said, all right, let's do the deal. And we did it. And it turns out it was never about money. It was, I mean, this fellow was already wealthy. Yeah, he's a rock star, so it was more a matter of respecting what he was doing, which was, which was important. The other thing that was interesting that came out of it, and it's a lesson that I learned, early on, is I've always, when I've looked at people negotiating, when people are trying to come up with a good licensing deal, because we've cleared 20,000 songs. I mean, we've done deals for, dozens of commercials, movies, sports shows, traditional TV programming, scripted TV programming. And what I would find is, you as soon as you go to somebody, particularly like for commercials, because what makes this song worth $500,000 and that song worth $100,000? And the answer is this band and their label or their publisher, they have the precedent that they've made a lot of money. And so they feel like A, they can walk away from the deal, and B, they feel like, this is really a better song for your commercial. So what I decided early on is I will never negotiate with anybody. And to this day, I don't negotiate with anybody. I always go in and I size things up ahead of time. And I say, this is what I think is a fair deal. And we'll either do it or we won't do it. And sometimes we don't do it. But I'll go in and I'll say, this is what I think is a fair deal. And if we negotiate, that's two people misleading each other to get to a number neither of them wanted in the first place. And so my thought is, if I go in and I honestly, tell them, hey, here's why I think this makes sense. In the universe of music, I mean, 800,000 songs a month get uploaded to Spotify. Actually, a week, I think, get uploaded to Spotify. It's not like there's this dearth of music that you can't find anything that would work. You can find beats per minute. You can find guitars and, horns, whatever you want to have in there. So the thought process is, if you pick a piece of music that takes somebody back to a point in their life when something happened for them that mattered, that can be powerful in a commercial. But a lot of songs were released that year, and you can pick another song that was released that year that will conjure up the same thing. So what we usually do is we go in with what I think is a fair deal, and the more you do it, the more people get used to working with you. And what I find is that almost every time I call somebody, they know that whatever number I'm telling them is really the number. It's not going to change. They also know that it's a fair number because we've been doing this long enough that, I know what's a fair number and what's an unfair number. And so we get our deals done very quickly. And it's always, I think everybody ends up leaving with mutual respect and a sense of like, okay, we're all looking out for everybody's best interest. And if we don't do this deal, sometimes it makes sense for somebody not to do a deal with me. If you have a song and I may not know it, but I may be pitching the use of your song for a commercial for a motorcycle, and somebody else might be pitching it for a car. And it may be that because they're both vehicles, somebody might come back and say, hey, this is a brand exclusive category. And if you can get more money for doing the car commercial than you can for my motorcycle commercial, you should say no. Unless I'm offering you way more money than the car company is offering. Yeah. So, a lot of times no's the right answer, but that's what we always found early on was just don't negotiate. Go in with what you think is fair.
Oh, that's
but also be fair. The other part of it is we don't try to lowball people. We always try to come in and say, here's what I think works. And
yeah, that's interesting. I like hearing what you're saying and then trying to tie it back to bands. I mean, a lot of the bands that I work with and talk with are either up and coming or kind of mid-tier festival bands or whatever. And I'm thinking about a local club that I used to play pretty frequently. I talked with the owner one night, and we were talking about a band that kind of left from just playing weekends there to touring and getting on some bigger tours. Yeah. And he was so mad that they wouldn't take anything less than $500 guarantee to come back to his club. Yeah. He's like, they sold out and they're famous or whatever. And at that point, $500 in my mind was so much money. Yeah. But then as you play a bunch of shows and you can play a restaurant and make $1,500.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big ask for four people in a band to, haul all their stuff and play this small club where they can't charge a high cover, all these things.
Yeah.
You get a really interesting perspective once you do the deals over and over again. And not everybody can relate to price fluctuations based on supply and demand and those sorts of things.
I was giving I was doing a lecture at a big university up in the Northeast, and it was interesting to me because I was supposed to go from like 5 till 6:15 and do a 15-minute Q&A, and I never cut the Q&A short. My thought is always, so whatever, you're there, whatever it takes, do it. So anyway, I went for about maybe an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. And the Q&A, I think, probably went 3 hours. It was just, it was fantastic. And these college kids are like, they're into it. Yeah. I mean, they're like because they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And whenever I do these things, I try to get the kids internships with labels and stuff, and so it's a win-win for everybody. But this one fella, and I thought it was cute. He was we'll call him Brian for now. So his name, so Brian ends up saying to me, "Do you like South by Southwest? You know, the Austin festival thing they have every year." And I said, "Yeah, sure. You know, it's fun." And he said, "Oh, you know, that's because you are a business guy, you know." And I'm laughing because I started out as a musician, you know, so like I get where he's coming from. He's got a band, I get it. And so I said, well, before you know, because there were like 200 people in the lecture hall. So I said, I don't want to embarrass you, Brian, in front of anybody. So before we say anything, how many of you agree with Brian that, you know, because it sounds like you're not a big fan of South by Southwest. And he said, no, I'm not, you know, and so about half the kids agreed. The kids on the performing arts side of the table did not, they agreed with Brian. The kids on the business school side of it, because it was a business school and the performing arts school together on this conference thing. So I said, okay. So I said, so, and he named a particular club, and I knew the club. And so he said, you know, we played there. How much do you think they paid us? And I said, well, let's start off with, I'll bet they paid you what you were worth. But I said, let's start off with, did anybody go to South by Southwest because you were playing at such and such club? And he said, well, no. You know, and I said, okay, but did anybody go to that club? Because I've been to that club and it is packed. It's on 6th Street. You know, it's packed every night. You know, and he said, well, yeah, no, nobody extra went there because of us. And I said, did you get the people there to drink more? Like, did you do something to, you know, to get them all drinking? You know, and he says, well, you know, no, we just played our music, you know, says, all right. So bars are not supposed to be in the business of breaking bands. That's what bands and managers and record companies do. Bars sell beer. So it sounds like nobody went to Austin. You didn't help the Convention and Visitors Bureau at all. And nobody showed up at the bar because of you. And even the people who did show up didn't drink anymore because of you. But they put you in front of 2,000 people. It sounds like you probably should have paid them. And I'll bet they let you come in for free, you know. And he started laughing. The whole room is like, you know, half of the people were booing me, and you know, the business kids were all clapping, you know. But it's one of those things where when you start looking at the exchange of value of what you're doing, I think part of any business is understanding what's a win. You know, if you're a band and you're trying to get exposure, then a win is just getting in front of enough people. I mean, I've managed a couple of artists, and a couple of them have done very well. And so, you know, when you put them in a position where if they're ready to deliver, and then you put them in a position where they can deliver, that may turn into something that can make them very wealthy. You know, and we've been fortunate that that's worked out for us a couple of times. And even like the thing I'm doing here, I'm at the Village Studios here in West LA, and you know, we got Nick James in the other room recording. This kid's as talented as anybody you will ever see. You know, I mean, you can go to you know, it's kind of, I always say, it's sort of somewhere between the Lumineers and Ryan Adams, you know. And I look at this and I'm thinking, you take a kid who's this talented, all I really need to do is put him in the right situation and get him in front of the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
And he will do the rest. He will build the audience because his band's amazing. He's amazing. His songs are fantastic. You know, maybe we can get some sync licensing on them so people will become aware of the songs and it becomes part of the fabric of somebody's life. But if you know, to me, that's a win. It's not a matter of, can we go play the bar down the street and get $500?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, you can play a wedding and get $10,000, but you're not going to build an audience by doing that. So, you know, so in our case, the whole thought process is, let's, you know, focus on what's a win, be able to define a win. And if you can define it, then you can execute on it, get where you're trying to go.
Yeah, that's as you were talking about the audience in this auditorium or whatever, the business side of me was just fighting with the artist side of me.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I was waiting for you to say the phrase "playing for exposure" because it's
yeah.
such a dirty phrase. But on the other hand, if you told me, hey, you can play for free tomorrow in front of 20,000 people,
Right.
sign me up.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
give me free water and a slice of pizza or whatever. So yeah, Austin. So I'm in Austin, Texas right now, and
Oh, cool.
I have
Cool.
I have a very long history, both making it into South by, being denied from it, playing side festivals, and I think any musician or most musicians, if they're honest in Austin, have a love-hate relationship with
Yeah.
South by. It either helps you or it doesn't do anything for you,
Right.
and it just that's how it is. But no, it is very interesting. On the one hand, it's such a shame that a lot of artists play for free too often when they could
Yeah.
get paid, especially at a restaurant or whatever. But I heard a really cool comparison between a performance and a show, or a performance and a concert. And the
Yeah.
idea is, if you're playing at a brewery to make sound in the corner, and maybe
Right.
some people tap their feet, that's a you're being paid for a performance. We need music. Go perform. Here's a few $100 and some beer. If you're at a club that just sells beer, that's a show. It's your
Yeah.
job to put on a show.
Yeah.
And the
Or if you can create a moment. I mean, the example, and I say this to every band that I've either worked with or that I'm friends with. If you can create the moments that people remember. I remember the first time that I saw Elton John, and I was like 15 years old or 14 years old, something like that. And I had never been to a real rock concert. I had been to like some, pop, country, and folk shows and stuff. And I saw Elton, and he comes out and he grabs the piano bench and throws it off the stage, and he just starts jamming, and he's amazing, and he's jumping on the piano, and it was just sensory overload. It was amazing. The band's running all over the place, and it was just wild. And I remember my dad asked me afterwards. He said, what'd you think of the show you went to with your buddies?" And I said, "It was amazing." And I'm telling him about it. He throws the bench off the stage and all this stuff. And my dad pointed out none of that had anything to do with music. His thing was that you remembered the stuff that didn't have anything to do with the music. And that always stuck in my head, that if you have a band and you're playing in a club, and not to get, you might want to cut this out if it's guttural, but but I had a dog, a boxer, adorable boxer dog. If you were playing in a club and my dog went up and peed on your mic stand, that would go viral. Everybody would know who you were. And the interesting thing is, if you're playing in a club and your stuff doesn't go viral, then in a sense, maybe my dog peeing on the mic stand is more entertaining than the band playing in the club. And when you look at the great artists that you love, the Bruce Springsteen. Let's see, Springsteen is the best example I can think of.
Yeah.
That guy creates a moment in every song. Even if you were not a fan, I am a fan of Bruce Springsteen, but even if you were not a fan of Springsteen, if you go to a show, there's a moment in every song, whether it's a story that he's telling, whether it's 10th Avenue Freeze Out when he jumps up on the piano, whether he's doing Cadillac Ranch and they're putting on the funny hats, or whether he's doing Promised Land and hands his harmonica to some kid. I mean, there's 20 things that happen at a Springsteen show that you're going to remember after you leave, that transcend the music. And the music is great, but it transcends the music. There's a fellow named Langhorne Slim who I'm a huge fan of. I've become friends with him. He's on Dual Tone Records. He's an Americana artist. And first time I saw him at the Sinclair up in Cambridge, up at Harvard Square, up in Boston. And it was amazing. He put on this show. I didn't know any of his songs. I went there because an ad agency that we were doing some business with was interested in maybe using him in a commercial. And I went to the show and I instantly became a fan. I've seen him like 20 times. Probably maybe the second or third time he spotted me in the audience and he said, "Pat, come back and see me after the show." And I go back, he gives me a cell phone number and he says, "You don't have to buy tickets to my shows anymore. Just text me and you're on the list." But he's one of these guys who he creates that thing that even, he happens to be a great musician. He happens to write fantastic songs. But even if he didn't, he would still be entertaining. And I think that that's the trick when you're working with bands, is can you create those moments that somebody, when they leave, they go back. And it's the same for a business, by the way. I mean, if I go into a meeting, if I show up at a meeting and do something that just people are going to remember for some reason, you bring somebody an orchid, or you bring, or you do, you do something at the meeting that comes off either as endearing or at least unoffensive or funny. And somebody will be, or you remember people's names. I mean, as silly as that sounds, if you walk into a meeting with 10 people and you remember everybody's name in the meeting, um, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, this person actually seems to care about us. They care about what they're doing and they care about us.
Yeah.
And, as long as it's sincere. I mean, I'm not talking about contrived nonsense, but I mean, if you're going in, I think the whole idea of everybody, for the most part, every company that's been around for a while is probably competent at what they do. So like sometimes we produce events or we'll do digital marketing, but like if we're producing a conference for somebody and we're bringing in big LED screens and that kind of stuff, anybody can rent LED screens and bring them in and hook them up. Any competent company that does that knows how to do it. But the trick is, are you willing to get in there early? Are you willing to work with their presentations and help them do better presentations and create value that indicates that, that A, you care more than the average company, but B, that you're going to make sure that their event is spectacular, as opposed to you're going to fulfill your obligation.
Yeah.
And that's the way that, that's the reason we're still in business after 35 years is the whole idea is to always deliver something that they're going to talk about. And the interesting thing early on, and I don't mean this in a name dropping way, it's kind of funny that it worked out this way. Early on, I was asked to take a young woman and play some Walmarts. And the young woman was Taylor Swift. And what was interesting was she was 17 years old. At 17 years old, Taylor was already working that way. I found her to be one of the nicest artists I had ever met. I would bump into her at like CMA parties or Grammy parties for years after that. I mean, I haven't bumped into her probably 4 or 5 years now, but for years I would bump into her at these parties and she would always say, hey, Pat, and come over and say hi.
Yeah.
Now, what does she meet? 10 million people a year, 20 million people a year, but the idea is and I suspect that it's sincere. I mean, we didn't have anything to do with helping her career. If anything, we just got to ride the wave after she became successful. We get to tell people that we did concerts with Taylor, But the reality is the way that she approaches her work. And when you look at the level of success she has now, I think the two are related to each other.
Oh, 100%. Because she's such a good example because she does not have the greatest voice to ever sing. She doesn't write the most incredible lyrics. They're generally kind of common words in the English language. That it's not like she's a phenom on guitarist or hits high notes like Mariah Carey. All of her stuff is pretty safe.
But she connects though. She can connect at a level, and she was doing that from early on. Like she would connect with people. We did a couple things in Walmarts where people would come up to get their CD autographed. Yeah. And normally when we would do this with a number of artists, we were doing it for the record labels. And you'd come in, the artist would play for 20 minutes and sign autographs for 40 minutes. Taylor, the first one that we did, they literally were shutting down the Walmarts. The fire marshal was coming around. They had news helicopters flying around the place. I mean, it was crazy. But she stayed there like hours on end. She signed an autograph or took a picture with every single person. And the thing is, girls were texting their friends like, oh my God, Taylor Swift is here. And people were showing up. And, obviously at that point, you don't know what's going through the mind of a 17-year-old girl, but she was behaving like every person that she was meeting was the most important person in the world for that moment. And I, it came off very sincere. And I suspect it was sincere on to whatever extent it can be for a performer. I suspect it really was sincere. And her ability to connect with people and her ability to, again, create moments. If this last tour, this Eras tour, I mean, every song was a moment. You know, like the some of the showmanship or the um, the show itself was so well crafted and stuff. But I've always felt that to be successful at anything, you don't have to be great at everything. You have to be outstanding at one or two things, and then really competent at everything else. And if you look at somebody like, I mean, from my generation growing up, the exceptions were like Elton John, because Elton could write, he could sing, he could play, he could perform. Like he literally was outstanding at every single thing that he did, which is why he's iconic. You know, he's still iconic. You know, but I think that for the most part, I think an artist who is outstanding at one thing, and if they happen to be outstanding at two or three things, you're talking about an iconic artist at that point.
Yep, yep. Um, I was thinking with your point with Taylor, uh, all these things are not the most amazing this, but her sincerity and authenticity,
Yeah.
I mean, is unparalleled. I mean, it's just unparalleled. And then you put solid songwriting, solid lyric
Yeah.
writing, just all these good but not the best ever with a few things that are exceptional. That's the package she.
Well, and I think the other part, even with her writing, her writing connects so well with her audience in the sense that, I always look at it because it's something that I've looked at when we work with ad agencies, or even in managing an artist, where whether a song is great or whether a song is not great is kind of subjective. A song that I think is great, like uh, well, I won't even name some of the artists, but I mean, if you take there are a couple of very famous contemporary Christian artists that I happen to be a fan of and that I've done some business with. And, for me, I might hear one of their songs and go, oh my God, this song's amazing. And I'll think the song is amazing because it reached me in a certain way. Or I'll hear a song by Counting Crows and I'll be like, I love Counting Crows, and I'll be like, my God, that's like Adam Duras. It might be one of the greatest poets of my lifetime. And yet, if somebody is not a Counting Crows fan, that song may not be a hit, but it's a song that connects so well with me. And I'm one of those people that if they're within 200 miles of Philly, I'm going to the show. And so I think that that's where when you build that fan base. Again, I mean, the Taylor example is that Taylor fans, her last tour, there were people standing outside the stadium so they could hear the music. I've never seen that before.
Yeah,
It was pretty amazing.
that's amazing. I want to. We could go on for a couple hours. I want to keep this within a reasonable amount of time. You touched on. I want to talk about your book. You touched on just briefly the 7 rules. So
Yeah.
your book is called "Getting It: 7 Rules and Other Useful Tidbits for Life."
Yeah, 7 rules and useful tidbits for life and business. Yep.
It's long. I did have to write it down and read it because
Yeah.
it came out almost a year ago
Yeah.
to the day. It's still pretty fresh and new. Um, I'd love to hear just kind of a little bit about the book, but what made you write it at this time? You've
Yeah.
done years of doing what you're doing. What made you say, all right, it's time for a book, and this book, and why 7 rules? Why not six?
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I never had any intention of writing a book, and I was approached by somebody felt that someone felt that something I did had affected their life in a very impactful way. And they knew somebody at the publishing company and mentioned it to them. And they came back and said, hey, that stuff that you talk about at colleges and that, because I lectured a bunch of schools, and they said that stuff that you talk about at colleges, and the stuff, in this case, it was a family member that he told me that I had had I guess a positive impact on a family member. And so he said, the stuff that you shared there, have you ever considered putting it in a book? And I said, I'm like terrible when it comes to that sort of stuff. Like that's just not really my thing. And so, but I said, in a sense, if I just took the notes of what I talk about at college is just my own philosophy on things. And then I started thinking about it. There's a picture on the wall. I have pictures on the wall of all my relatives and stuff, those who are still here and those who have passed away. And there's a picture of my dad on the wall. And it's funny because he's got this funny expression on his face. It was from a time when I remember he was dealing with some real challenges at work, and he ended up at Christmas time. He gave us all. They took their pictures at work, and I think he was proud that they took his picture at work. And I don't know if it was a joke or if it was not a joke. I never did actually find out, what he was thinking, but he went and he had this picture printed up and he had it framed and he gave it to all of us, to my sister and me and my mom and a couple other people. And, of course we were all laughing, like, oh, good, we got a picture of dad. Now, the funny thing is at the time he was like 55 years old. And so I had this picture on the wall and he's got this smirk on his face in the picture. And he's looking, he's looking at the camera. So when you look at it, it looks like he's looking at you. And when I'm doing well, and with any business, you got the ups and downs and stuff. So, when things are going well and I look at it, it looks like he's proud of me. And when I'm doing badly and I look at it, it looks like he's making fun of me. And it occurred to me when I looked at it, I started thinking, when he was 55, I was like 25. And at 25 years old, you're not thinking about what your parents are dealing with. You're thinking about yourself. I mean, I was 23 when I got married. So, you're thinking about, oh, I'm trying to do this. I got my own job. I'm doing, whatever it is I'm doing. And I mean, I always had a great relationship with my parents. I loved my parents, but at 25, you're thinking about your 25-year-old life. Yeah. And it occurred to me that I've got two kids. My kids are very successful. My daughter works in the music industry. She runs A&R for a record company, and she deals with rock stars, and she graduated Dean's List from the Wharton Business School at the University of Penn. I mean, she's a genius, And my son is he's a touring guitar player. He plays with some famous people. He's played on some albums, and he's got a dozen songs in TV shows, one in a video game, one in a national commercial. So they've done well. And what occurred to me is when I was 55 and they were 20 and 25, they have no idea what's going through my head. You think as a parent, you're thinking that your kids understand, whatever it is you're dealing with. And we all deal with something. I mean, I've been blessed because I have a wonderful wife and I have wonderful kids. I'm blessed with good health. I got lots of great relationships. I make a living doing what I enjoy with and for people that I love. So it's great. But at the same time, there's pressures that you're dealing with. And there's reasons why you make certain decisions in your life. And while they're obvious to you, they're not obvious to your kids. And so I started thinking, like, what if I died tomorrow? If I dropped dead tomorrow, would my kids ever benefit from my own life experience? And so I started thinking, like, all right, well, that's a good reason to write a book. Wow. And what's been surprising about it is, I wrote the thing in, several months, I guess. And I'm not a writer, and I wasn't, wasn't using AI or any of that stuff. I was just dictating. I call it PI, it's pat intelligence, So I would just dictate it into my phone, and then I would email it to myself, and then I would go back and I would change it, and I'd say, well, this, this makes sense, that makes sense, and I centered it on those rules, on the idea that, God loves you no matter what. Fear, doubt, and indecision kill, but they die in the presence of faith. Relationships determine results. Your heart knows what you want most, while your head knows what you want now. Always follow your heart, not your head. Never give up. Don't put yourself in a position where you're tempted to put what you want now ahead of what you want most, and then never give up. And as I was building that, I started thinking, I've had a unique set of experiences throughout my life because of the business I'm in. I mean, I deal on the corporate side. I deal with CEOs. We've done business with major global brands because I work with every major sport. We've dealt with all the major broadcast outlets and the sponsors of those brands because we work with record companies. I've gotten a chance to hang out with rock stars and the stuff that we do. So when you put all those things together, you have some nice little anecdotes that you can put in there, and that you can build on those rules and how they come about. And so for me, it was one of those things where, in a sense, it was a little bit cathartic putting it together. And what's been interesting is I probably at some point I should probably change this, but I have my cell phone on my website. So I actually got calls from strangers in a couple of cases saying, hey, I read your book and it really had an impact and it made a difference. And also from some people that I knew. And it's done surprisingly well. I didn't do it with the hope or intention that it would do well. I didn't really try to market it at all. I just figured that, if I kick the bucket tomorrow, at least my kids will have some idea what was going through my head. But what I found was that, now I'm doing a couple more now. I'm actually doing a revised version of that one where I'm adding things in on the sort of the seven silos and how they work together. Um, but I found that it's been an interesting process, and I end up getting speaking gigs out of it because now people actually look at it and they're like, oh, they know what you're going to talk about, instead of it being, a lot of people who used to work in the music business now work at universities, but the music business changes so rapidly that they like to bring in people who currently work, with record labels and publishers. So I get invited to speak at a lot of colleges, and when you have a book, it actually makes it a little bit easier.
No, it's like having an album to tour behind.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
my tech rider is easier than the average rock star. I just need a bottle of water and a microphone. So
I like the title track, Seven Rules. Hit.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, well, Pat, this has been a wonderful visit. I I would love talking another hour.
No, absolutely, Wiley. It was so great meeting you. It's so great to get a chance to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Good luck with Nick's album. I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear it. I imagine it's going to be months before it's mixed and mastered and released and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we're doing a couple songs at a time. So we're gonna, nowadays it's a different paradigm now. You kind of release a song every 6 weeks or so, and so we're doing a handful, kind of an EP right now. But they're turning out great. It's exciting and it's fun.
All right. Well, Pat, thanks again. Really enjoyed having you on the show here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.